The Glasgow Bethlehem Twinning Association, an association that was set up last year to promote the twinning between the cities of Glasgow and Bethlehem, with the idea of promoting solidarity, knowledge, contacts, and exchanges between the people and the communities in the two cities. It's going to be an educational event. We have our speaker that I will introduce very briefly to you. But first of all, I would like to also say that it's also a fundraising meeting. And the funding that will be raised tonight will benefit our speaker's foundation that we will also introduce, the Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta Children's Fund. They will also benefit the Scottish Palestine Cancer Nurse Project, which is a project that has been going on since 2014 and to promote the education of cancer nurses from Palestine, both the West Bank and Gaza. And it's a very successful project that we discussed in our last event. And the next cohort of students from Palestine are going to come to Glasgow in June. And finally, the funds will also benefit our associations, and we can continue our work, continue growing this community of people who want to learn more and grow their solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Bethlehem and all of Palestine. So please give generously. If you have some cash to part with, there's going to be buckets. We have a fantastic raffle. So there's raffle tickets that you can buy, and we also have a bake sale, so lovely goods to eat later on. So we will start with a presentation by Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta that will last approximately half an hour, and then there will be questions and answers, so you will have a chance to ask your questions. And after that, you have an opportunity for informal networking. You will be able to get raffle tickets, along with food and drink, and just to continue chatting and engaging with each other. So having said all of that, I think a couple of more practical things. Toilets are just outside here, and that's also the fire exit, I think. And we are going to record the presentation tonight. The Glasgow Bethlehem Twinning Association now also has a website, and you'll be able to see that again on our website. So, having said all of that, now it's my great pleasure to start introducing our speaker this evening. Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta is a London-based plastic and reconstructive surgeon. He has worked in numerous conflict zones. He's been on many missions in Gaza, but he's also worked in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, and Lebanon, if I'm not mistaken. He has been involved with medical aid for Palestinians ever since he was a medical student. And he has served in Gaza on numerous occasions with all the conflicts there since the first intifada. He has become a very well-known name and a very well-known face since the current ongoing genocide started on the 8th of October 2023. He was one of the last persons to be able to cross the border from Rafah into Gaza, and he has been working at Al-Shifa Medical Hospital for many weeks after that attack started. That's when a lot of lessons when I got to know Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, because in addition to his tireless medical work, he's done lots of media work, press work, even loads of interviews to tell the world what was going on and to warn the dangers of what was happening and what was unfolding. And he continues to work as a tireless advocate to save Gaza ever since. He has also started to call the international community to think about the future and to prepare for the after, so that we can be as ready as possible to rebuild once all of this is finally over. In 2024, he launched the Ghassan Abu Sitta Children Fund, a program that aims to bring injured children from Gaza to Lebanon so that they can get long-term medical, psychological, and social care in a holistic manner. And this is what he's devoting most of his efforts to at the moment. He has long-standing links to Glasgow because the University of Glasgow is where he completed his medical studies, and a lot of you will know that last year he was overwhelmingly voted to become director of the University of Glasgow, sorry. And all of us here are very proud of that, in addition to everything else that you do. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, who will talk to us about where after the genocide. Please welcome him with a very warm applause.
And for me, the twinning between Glasgow and Bethlehem, which the seats for which were sold when I was still a student in the early 90s at Glasgow University, is really a testament to the spirit of the city. This almost instinctive internationalism and solidarity that Glasgow and its people have always shown to people across the world. And as a student here in the late 80s and early 90s, I saw that when the world had not even spoken of Palestine, this twinning took place, the Suffrage Appeal Scholarship at Glasgow University took place, Scottish Medical Aid for Palestinians have been set up here, Scottish Friends of Palestine was set up here in the 80s. And so it is especially poignant for me to be back here speaking to you as someone who saw this twinning beginning. It's very difficult to find words these days, especially in the last 48 hours when Israel has killed 300 women, children, men, starving women, men, and children. Civilians that it is intentionally starving. For no reason other than the need for its slaughter to be performed, for that brutalism, that logic of erasure and elimination of Palestinians to be performed. But it's also an indication that while we all watch in horror at what is now probably the killing of 15% of Gaza's population, both directly through traumatic injuries and indirectly through the destruction of the health system, through the destruction of water and sewage, through the denial of access to food and manufacturing and family. Despite that horrific genocidal number, and people asking where does Gaza go and where does Palestine go after this genocide, it is critical as we see this killing frenzy that Israel is committing against people who are in the throes of famine, to ask, where does Zionism in Israel go? What happens when an ideology has nothing else left than killing? Then when it becomes devoid of any other components of political thought, whether you agree or disagree, and what is left is this continuous need for a war that is not just been waged against the Palestinians for over 18 months, but then against the Lebanese and the Syrians and the Yemenis. That addiction, that frenzied addiction that now is reaching regional and uncontrolled levels, where the killing has to be non-humanitarian and gratuitous. for it to be almost as a form of pure violence, that it is not aimed at achieving anything other than itself. So what have the Israelis done to Gaza to get us to this point where we think that 15 to 16% of the population has been killed? And we need to remember that in the 5 years of the Second World War, France lost 4% of its population. And so the scale of this is unprecedented. Israel, in addition to the bombing, over 100,000 tons of bombs that led to what the economists last week believes is 105,000 traumatic deaths, i.e. 5% of the population. In addition to that direct traumatic death, created what we think, or we can think of, is a biosphere of genocide. So that biosphere is the social, biological, and physical environment that people in Gaza live. And that biosphere has within it all of the components of death and injury and ill health that allows the continuous killing of people and the taking of their lives without the need for laws. And so what I would like to do is basically just dismantle the components of the creation of this bias, so that we can understand the differential between this 100,000 traumatic deaths and then what the Lancet Medical Journal believes is around 290,000 total deaths, but constitute 15%. So Israel set about destroying the physical environment in Gaza. And by the physical environment, we are talking about 90 to 95% of all buildings. And this destruction is either of whole neighborhoods, and then the whole of the northern part of Gaza, and then the whole of the southern part of Gaza. And then the destruction of specific buildings that have a disproportionate effect on the population. And so we saw a few days ago the bombing of the European hospital in Rafah, a week before that the bombing of Nasser Hospital, which brings to a total of 33 hospitals out of 36 that have now been destroyed. You then destroy all of the water and sewage infrastructure. And so over 350 miles of sewage pipeline in Gaza have been destroyed. 9 sewage pumping wells and sewage treatment plants have been destroyed. And you deny the population access to drinking water by destroying the water desalination plants and 200 municipal wells, so that the amount of water, drinking water, available to the population decreases by 95%. And in doing this physical destruction, you do two things. The 50 million tons of rubble, of urban that have been created, contain over 200 toxic chemicals that are now being inhaled by the population or ingested by the population. And so this 50 million ton contains not only PCB, which is contains the remnants of the plastics that we find in buildings. It contains lye, which is a drain cleaner that is part of the making of cement, selenium, heavy metals that are both carcinogenic, i.e. cause cancer. They create deformities in newborn children and cause multiple organ failure. And by this this physical destruction, this toxification of the environment, and this targeted destruction of critical buildings, the health system, water and sewage, you are able to destroy the biological. So not only have you created a famine, which has led to directly the killing of 57 children, but that famine exists like an iceberg, because underneath those who are directly killed, there's another 9,000 that need immediate hospitalization for severe acute malnutrition. And then underneath that, there's another layer of 60,000, of whom 16,000 are breastfeeding and pregnant women who have acute malnutrition that needs intervention. So what you've then created is yet another wave of injury and killing that is able to, on its own, take the lives of Palestinians. But then, when met with over 100,000 wounded, works synergistically, because if you're malnourished, you will succumb to a lesser wound. Your body is unable to heal. Even surgical interventions no longer heal. Add to that what you've done with the destruction of water and sewage and people's homes, if you've created a perfect environment for infectious diseases epidemics. So 2.1 million reported infectious diseases cases in Gaza. Diarrhea, polio, all of these illnesses that you know when you have no access to clean drinking water, and you don't have access to washing up water, and you live in crowded schools that are not designed to house 20,000, 30,000. That infectious diseases takes, and of that group, 40% are under the age of 5. That infectious diseases is a mechanism, or is it one of the genocidal machines that is taking people's lives? If we then mix that with this massive wounding of individuals, over 100,000, well, if you're malnourished and wounded, you're more likely to die of lesser wounds. If you're malnourished and have a diarrheal disease, you're more likely to die of less infectious disease or a less severe degree of malnutrition. And if you have that triad of wounding, infectious diseases, and malnutrition, then the chances of survival become even less, or even a small, moderate survivable wound. So we've seen how you've created mechanisms that can function on their own. The malnourishment, the destruction of the health system, which means that 600,000 patients who have manageable chronic diseases, high blood pressure, heart disease, kidney disease, insulin, dependent diabetics, non-insulin dependent diabetics, all of these, by the siege that you are creating and the destruction of the health system, you ensure that these chronic illnesses become life-threatening illnesses. And so the diabetics not receiving their medication go into diabetic ketoacidosis and eventually die. Within the first 3 weeks of Israel violating the ceasefire, 30 dialysis patients died because they did not access the dialysis services. Anyone who's had a heart attack in Gaza had no access to a cardiac cath lab in Gaza. Cancer patients could not get treatment, did not get diagnosed early enough, and therefore they would die.